Kathleen Peterson was examined by Dr. Radish with the medical examiner's office and autopsy. The autopsy indicated that there were 7 lacerations to the head. There was also an injury to the neck, which was a fracture with associated hemorrhage of the superior cornu of the left thyroid cartilage. Dr. Radish did indicate that, in her opinion, that the injury to the neck was consistent with a strangulation, and also that the injuries were not consistent with a fall, but rather with a beating.
Real Crime Profile is made possible by many wonderful sponsors, from Madison Reed Hair Color to Stitch Fix Personal Shopping to Gobble Meal Delivery Service. So please, when you hear a special offer from one of our sponsors, do check it out and take advantage of it and show them your support for our show. You can also go to our website, realcrimeprofile.com, and see an up-to-date listing of the companies who help bring you Real Crime Profile and the limited time offers they have for our listeners. Remember, we can't do our show without you, and we certainly cannot do it without our sponsors. So thank you all for supporting Real Crime Profile.
Up till the death of Kathleen, I really didn't know who Michael Peterson was, other than being a writer and a military veteran. I didn't know him personally, didn't know his character. Who can do something like that? Somebody that's got a very, very bad temper. Talking with witnesses and some of Elizabeth Ratliff's family members, he's got a very bad temper. A lot of people that I interviewed said they were the perfect couple. I wish I had a husband like that, but going back to the materials that we found in his computer and in his home, he was not a happily married man to Kathleen Peterson.
Hello and welcome to Real Crime Profile. This is Jim Clemente, retired FBI profiler, former New York City prosecutor, and writer-producer of CBS's Criminal Minds. And with me today is...
Laura Richards, former criminal behavioural analyst, New Scotland Yard, and founder of Paladin National Stalking Advocacy Service.
And I'm Lisa Zambetti. I am the casting director for CBS's Criminal Minds. And I just want to give a shout out to my partner, Becky Silverman, who does cast Criminal Minds with me. She and I are nominated for an Artios Award for the film we cast called Akeda. We are thrilled and honored to be nominated this year with some really heavy-hitting casting directors. So I just want to give my love to my Becky. And there we go.
Wow, that's great. Congratulations.
Yeah, congrats. Is that a big awards thing at the beginning of next year? Or?
It is. It's like the Oscars for casting directors, since at this time we don't have an Oscar. But so it's the closest thing that we get to honoring the many hardworking men and women who bring you the people you see on your screens and streaming. So
I was just going to say, I posted on Instagram, I think about it, because, some real hard-hitting shows and casting. So I'm hoping, Lisa, you'll also send us some pictures of the awards evening. If you're going to get glammed up, that would be awesome.
Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, good luck.
Thank you.
All right, so what we're going to do in this episode is try to wrap up the bits and pieces that are left from our analysis of the Staircase docuseries. The first thing I'd like to talk about is statements by Michael Peterson about his sexuality. And we've already discussed this in a fair amount, but he made a statement in an AP interview that he said that Kathleen was comfortable with his bisexuality. And then he was asked, did you all talk about it? And he says, very interestingly, says, not really. It was sort of in an oblique kind of way. I just want to talk about, from a statement analysis perspective, what that actually means. Not really, repeating it is overselling, and saying not really, well, you're basically saying you didn't. The answer is no. And then he said it was sort of in an oblique way. Oblique obviously means not directly, and sort of. Why do you have to say sort of oblique? If you actually had an oblique conversation about it, why wouldn't you just say an oblique way? But when you interject the word sort of, those words tell us that you're not even buying into what's about to come out of your mouth. You're not even able to sell it to somebody else because you can't buy into it yourself. You're distancing yourself from it. So when you say sort of anything, I sort of slept last night. Well, that means you didn't sleep well last night. And when you say you sort of talked about it in an oblique way, well, it's even further from oblique. So I just think what's important about that is it seems to directly contradict his son Todd's statement, where Todd said he overheard a definitive conversation about the gay pornography that was on his computer, and that Kathleen and Michael were very engaged in this conversation, and she wasn't angry, and she just wanted to get it off his computer. Well, that would be a very direct discussion about this topic. And Michael now claims, that they never had a direct discussion about the topic. So what do you think about that, Laura?
Well, which one is it? I mean, two different accounts. I certainly think his language is interesting at multiple points across the series. And that distancing, the vagueness, he's smart enough to know when he needs to probe something or when he needs to come back off something and not be contradicted. That doesn't surprise me at all. He wants to sow the seed. And as I already said about the bisexuality, and the staircase doesn't really talk to it. It's the fact that Kathleen was very unhappy with the first marriage of her husband cheating of her and the breaking of the marriage vows. That was the problem.
Right.
And so I still cannot believe, and it's my own opinion, that here's a traditional woman who super sociable, bright, vivacious, gregarious, that she, while she was working these 14-hour days and all the stress of Nortel, that she was happy going to work, working those hours, and for Michael to be seeing somebody else, even if it were just for sexual purposes. It doesn't match with who she was. And I do believe if there were a retrial and other members of the family were questioned about that, I believe that they would have had to have told the truth, that they didn't know about his bisexuality and that it wasn't something that was out in the open and discussed. I just don't buy that.
It's just he contradicts himself, and he contradicts what Todd said, and it undermines his credibility. And of course, it is one of the only things that we have, one of the only concrete things that we have that might supply a motive. And so it's a very critical point. And when you see his credibility undermined in that point, I think it really goes very well towards a motive to kill.
Gosh, this is so weird for me, but how do I really understand? Every time I hear him talk about this, or I hear the girls talk about this, I somehow understand this. Now, don't get me wrong. He most likely killed his wife, but for some reason, this equivocating with she knew but she didn't know, I completely understand that. I mean, I know people. I've had these conversations of, I'm not directly saying what my sexuality is, but you kind of know, and there's enough breadcrumbs that we leave for each other. And I'm not saying it directly, but we all know. I understand these subtleties within a family and these dynamics, you know what I mean? And when I watch him talking about what she knew and what she didn't, I just somehow I reconcile these contradictions. Am I making sense? I mean, I get it. I can't quite articulate why I get it, but I get these very uncomfortable things you can't say directly to your partner, but peripherally,
Well, I totally get it, and you're certainly entitled to your opinion. I disagree with it because I think it's something that he specifically acts nonchalant about. Had he acted any way differently about it, had he not used the excuse of, hey, yeah, it's no problem, it's no big thing, it's nothing, then maybe I would agree with you. But he does the exact opposite. He, the guy who did the behavior. So I'm going by his behavior. He doesn't seem to have been, quote, hiding it in that way. He doesn't seem to be embarrassed by it in any way. And he wants us to believe that it's the most natural thing in the world.
And he oversells so many things as well. And, the rehearsed line, I remember the first time he meets the press, Kathleen was my life. I whispered her name in my heart 1,000 times. Yeah, she is there. I would never have done anything to hurt her. All these kind of bizarre Shakespearean, and actually those lines are borrowed from something that Candice talked about. They weren't actually his lines, but other things tend to have been well rehearsed or prepared in terms of his response. Other times, yes, you see him being very blasé, certainly enjoying courting the cameras. And then other times where there are uncomfortable moments. And I think these are the uncomfortable moments because he knows. And, he knows that there's a contradiction there. And it is by his own words. So I do kind of get what you're saying, Lisa, but it's looking across the baseline of all of him and how, he's a very good storyteller.
Yeah.
And he can thread things and he can manipulate. And he's very good at it. And, as Lestrade says, he wants to believe him, but he knows that something's not right. And that's the whole thing about Michael Peterson. You have to look for those things that corroborate, those things that don't, that contradict. And the language that he uses, even when talking about Germany, ever, the kind of the overselling, overcompensating, trying to convince people on the areas that are, uncomfortable. That's the difference that I see versus at the end where he's sat in court and he's got his feet on the railings and he's just so blasé about the whole, waiting for the final determination. And it's like he's just watching a football game. He's just a caricature of himself, in many senses. And he enjoys every moment. But I get a sense of his uncomfortability and where he's trying to explain things away, where that ease doesn't exist anymore. And I think around his sexuality and this perfect image that he has tried to project of he and Kathleen, I just can't buy into the fact that with her victimology that she would be okay with all of that. Even though someone sent me a Twitter message saying, oh, because the first marriage broke up, she's even more, because of infidelity, she'll be even more likely to accept his bisexuality. I mean, I don't subscribe to that either.
I don't think that she may have, look, I hate to bring up the Kardashians, and I can't believe I'm going to do that right now, but Kris Jenner and Bruce Jenner, obviously he wanted to be a woman for a really long time during their marriage, and she couldn't admit it, but she knew, but she didn't know, and she didn't want to accept it, and this happens. And it doesn't mean you don't love each other and you don't live with each other for a really long time, but it's not something you want, but under the surface, it's there. No,
I don't disagree that can happen. But what's the evidence of that? We can't rely on his inconsistent behavior about it. If he wasn't hiding it from her, then I would accept that. He was deliberately hiding it from her. He deliberately said, I can only do this when she isn't around. He manipulated the situation so that he was home. When she was away, he was home.
Right.
Around. So there is no indication to the contrary. I mean, when Bruce Jenner decided to change his sexuality, actually to go for it, I mean, obviously he made a decision at some point and he told the people around him about it. And that's the time when you know that everybody's aware of it. To say that they were aware and then say, well, I was sort of had an oblique conversation about it. No, I never talked to her about it. I mean, it's a point of contention in the trial. It is a motive for murder. And so it's something that's very important. And he should be incredibly careful about what he says about it. And he's not. And he's inconsistent. And he's inconsistent over time. And he's inconsistent with his son's statements. So that's why it's very important and instructive to me. But he also goes on to say something like this. It's like when you get away with something and you keep getting away with it, then it's like, oh, it's all right because you got away with it. So that last part, because you got away with it, is my additional parenthetical. But he's saying, I mean, he makes statements like this that to me, mirror exactly what I believe happened in this case, that he got away with it the first time and it emboldened him. And if he was this guy who was into coercive control and he was actually just using his, quote, marriage to cover for what his real sexuality was, and he got called out on it, and maybe the first time it was something else. Maybe it was a monetary thing. I don't know. But just his behavior is so bizarre throughout. I have a really difficult time trusting him and his word. And so much of his side of the story is just his word. There is absolutely no corroborating evidence for it. And so because he's so unreliable to me, I don't believe him, and I don't believe his defense.
If you're anything like me with days that are super busy, that sometimes you have to eat on the go, but you want something healthy and you want it fast, well then I know exactly where you want to turn to, and that's Daily Harvest. Daily Harvest delivers perfectly portioned cups of frozen organic fruits and vegetables directly to your door. All you have to do is add water or your favourite milk to your cup, then just blend or heat. Daily Harvest's new savoury harvest bowls are an amazing healthy dinner that's faster than takeout. And I have got to say, I love their strawberry and peach smoothie. You just add almond milk and then put it in the blender, and it's absolutely delicious. And Daily Harvest cups are portable, so you can fuel up on the go. If you want to take advantage of our lovely listener offer, then go to daily-harvest.com and enter promo code REALCRIME to get 3 cups free in your first box. That's promo code REALCRIME for 3 free Daily Harvest cups at daily-harvest.com. daily-harvest.com.
Michael Peterson, to me, lives a fictional life and does not tell the truth. Anything he has to say is absolutely meaningless. Beat my chest. He pled guilty. It felt good. It really did. An innocent man does not plead guilty. Mr. Peterson pled guilty today, and that is how he will be treated forever. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're more than welcome.
And that's the whole problem, that I have with it, is that we are watching something through someone else's lens. Kathleen's story is being told through the prism of Michael. And that's what the problem is for me. I want to hear her narrative. I want to understand her in all of this. But in The Staircase, you don't get that sense. And I'm afraid just dropping in a few pictures and him in the swimming pool and showing a few photos of her just doesn't cut it for me. Her narrative is absent, as is Liz's narrative. And they are footnotes in their own cases. The whole narrative is fashioned by him. And Lestrade, although he does try, and what he talks to is that he says he has a great storyteller in Michael, and he tries to create distance. But I don't believe that he has achieved that in saying that he tries to create distance between him and Michael, and that it's not a story about whether Michael is guilty or innocent. It's a story of the criminal justice system. But actually it's not. It is about, when everyone watches it, everyone is, so did he do it or didn't he? And without having the other side to the story, without hearing everything about Liz's life and the crime scene, without hearing Kathleen, the conversations with Caitlin that she was having about the money issues and all of that is absent, so that we have to take Michael at his word. But Jim and I do not have to take Michael at his word because he is inconsistent. As Jim pointed out, in those 3 accounts, they are wildly inconsistent. And his own son has said something in a definitive that, yes, they did have a full conversation about it, and that he says it was an oblique conversation. And there are many of those moments across The Staircase, and that's why it's important for listeners to read other material, to read Diane Fanning's book, Written in Blood, to listen to Beyond Reasonable Doubt, which I still believe the Radio 5 Live 18-part is unbiased. It tries to achieve both sides of trying to, interview family that knew Kathleen the best, and that episode with Candice is fantastic, as well as interview, they tried to get David Rudolph on, but that fell through multiple times, speaking to Michael Peterson and challenging that narrative. And I think they did a very good job of that, of challenging the narrative and not just accepting what you see on the screen or what Michael Peterson says. That's what I would invite our listeners to do, because ultimately where everyone ends up, having watched The Staircase, the conversation afterwards is, did he do it or didn't he?
Right, right. Well, that's what I love actually about episodes like episode 3, where Michael Peterson actually isn't in it very much, and they just show David Rudolph and Ron Garrett going to Germany. And the process is, what does a defense attorney do when something like Germany pops up? And so my favorite parts of the documentary are watching him navigate that, and the blow poke and this and that and this and that. But yeah, you're right. There's no way that a personality like Michael Peterson can't completely obscure the sun. You know, he's somebody who's just such a fascinating, for better or worse, person to watch, that you do get distracted, you know, by him, by what the whole point of the documentary is.
Absolutely. And then there obviously are some omissions in The Staircase, you know, that are, for me, quite major. And
Are we going there now? Are we going to go there now? Should we do this now?
well, I was going to jump in one other thing before we go
okay,
there,
okay.
which was to talk about just Michael's sister again, because if you listen to her talk on Beyond Reasonable Doubt, it's sort of the last part, episode 18, where she's asked, you know, what did she think about The Staircase? And she says, you know, she thought it was well done. It's been well edited. She thought the cello music was terrific. But she believes that, you know, I think we all appreciate the music that adds to the drama and the twists and the turns. But she believes that it does only represent, you know, Michael Peterson's side because of the access issue. But she would have liked there to have been clarity around the fact that there was a fracture of the thyroid cartilage, which points to strangulation on the front of Kathleen's neck. And, you know, the bloody footprint that we talked about on the back of Kathleen's pants. And she would have liked Liz Ratliff to be talked about more, because she was a very good friend of Liz, and she feels that Liz was forgotten in the whole process. And she does talk to the fact that she feels that Michael Peterson got away with murder twice, and that her brother is a murderer. He got away with killing 2 people, and that he's dangerous, and that she's scared of him now. Which I think is a very interesting statement. And when that's put to Michael Peterson, you'll hear him give a very bizarre account as to why Anne would say something like that. And he says, well, you know, in all families, people fall out, and, you know, that's kind of no big deal. But if you were to ask my brothers, because I talked to my brothers and they all said, you know, I said to them, did Anne really fall out with me because of this? But he doesn't say what this is. And he says, yes, my brother said that's exactly why she did what she did. And if you talk to anybody, they'll tell you, you know, about Anne. But he never really gives any information away about why Anne would say something like that. Yeah. He's so evasive. And that's where I think, again, when you hear him, when it's put to him, he's got the capability and the capacity to answer, but actually not answer at all. Just a load of words, which you don't really know what they mean.
It's like a word salad. I mean, it's just...
Yeah, he doesn't talk to any, you know, specific incident, but for a sister still to say that. Yeah. And by the way, he also had a book deal lined up with HarperCollins that on his acquittal, and, you know, that got you know, totaled. I assume it's from Candice's side, from the family's side, that they put a stop to that. But he also had his narrative already lined up in book format to you know, with a publishing deal.
Well, they probably shouldn't have. Well, they
The Staircase.
Probably should not have put the kibosh on that, because he still owes Caitlin a great deal of money in their civil suit judgment, and, you know, he has obviously no way to pay her that. But which, you know, is similar to what the Goldmans did with the book that OJ quote unquote wrote. I mean, at least it's a way for him to...
If I did it.
Yeah, right.
I'm sure this would be a very similar type of book.
Right, right. Yeah. Who wouldn't read that? Jeez.
It may be, you know, that they could get some money out of it, but in the end, who's going to be the one that suffers from it? I mean, Kathleen and her memory. And I think that it would be much better if they don't. And, you know, and he's not allowed to brag and boast the way that OJ did, and basically, you know, gloat that he got away with murder.
Yeah. Well, Lisa, do you want to, is this a good point to talk about the other bigger mission in the staircase? Do you want to weigh in?
I want you to take us into this and contextualize it and when this issue started.
Well, you may need to fill in the points of the length of time of the relationship, but Beyond Reasonable Doubt also discovered that there'd been a relationship between Sophie Brunette, who's one of the editors, and Michael Peterson, and that they had fallen in love. And she spent I believe it was over a number of years. I don't think it was brief, because she was visiting him in prison. The neighbor, Michael Peterson, said that she had stuck with him for a long time. She was writing letters, and it was known about that she was in love with Michael Peterson. And it came out recently, didn't it, in the media as well?
I was going to say, so when he was released from prison, in order to have a new trial, he lived with a neighbor. And so this neighbor bore witness to this relationship as well. And Sophie, I'm sorry, what is her last name again?
Brunette.
So Ms. Brunette.
Brunnet.
Right.
Yeah.
Coming to visit him and having a romantic relationship with him for 15 years. 15 years, I believe. Now, Jim, when we do Criminal Minds, do you think Shamar Moore has ever met Heba, one of our editors? Why in the fuck would an on-screen talent ever meet an editor? This is completely bizarre to me, because that's a completely post-production team of people who never would be in each other's orbits. Am I wrong? I mean...
Well, yeah, I think it's a little apples and oranges, because I think that, scripted versus non-scripted, there may be some differences there. But the fact is that I believe that Michael Peterson was involved in every aspect of this production from start to finish. I think he was the reason why it happened. It could not have happened without him wanting to do it. And I think he opened up his life and his case to the production so that he could get his, quote, 15 minutes of fame. I think that was incredibly important to him. And so I don't think it's outrageous that he would have tried to meet as many people as he could and been as, quote, charming as he possibly could have. And the editor is somebody that he, of course, would want to influence. I mean, he would want to have control, knowing what he's like. He would want to have control over the story that was actually told, because as we know, editing can change a story 180 degrees if it wants to.
Right, and he is all about control. That's the whole point to him. Everything that we see on camera is about him controlling the narrative. So that makes sense.
Image.
And yeah, his image management. And Lestrade is asked about this too. And he says, well, I trusted her. She was a good person and a good professional. And, I struggle with that, because it's not about integrity in one sense, because yes, she may well be a good person, but you would still have bias. You're sleeping with this person. You're having a full-on relationship with them. How could you not be conflicted on that point?
Oh, no. Let me tell you something. You know that I have defended many, many filmmakers, many, many documentarians. You know that I know what a big uphill battle is to get these projects to the light of day. This is the most egregious abomination that I have ever fucking heard of, and it is the most unprofessional, transgressive thing that a filmmaker could ever fucking do. So, I mean,
Really feel
I am so absolutely just stymied. Absolutely stymied.
You're just leaving breadcrumbs for me at the moment, Lisa. I need more detail.
So let me tell you. No.
You're making me do too much work.
No, listen. I mean, I had a lot of respect for this filmmaker, as I've watched. And when this came out, it just completely destroyed the entire documentary for me. I mean, I cannot even, I can't even tell you. So I worked for a very famous documentarian named Al Maisels, who one of his biggest documentaries was Grey Gardens, where he and his brother followed around two women, whatever. At one point in this documentary, one of the women falls in love with the documentarian, right? And instead of pretending like it didn't happen, they completely show it. And they completely admit, like, yes, this changes the documentary. This woman is now performing for this filmmaker who she's in love with now, and you can see it. So if he had admitted that this is what's happening and turned the lens upon his own team, then I would have, okay, I could go with that. But to hide it and to make excuses for it is absolutely the worst thing. And this makes it reality. For me, it's like reality TV, and it's unconscionable. It's bullshit. It is absolutely the worst thing I've ever heard. So there you go.
Well, I don't know how we top that. but I will say this. If he did have influence over the editing, if he did have input into it, and he still came off the way he did, it shows with a glaring light his narcissism. Because it was all about him. It was all about him and his reactions and his experience through this. And so to know that at least one of the editors was having a relationship over 15 years with him during this time period, and to see the results of that on screen, it just, to me, confirms so many things about his behavior and his behavioral type. I do not believe that anybody can argue that this man was not a narcissist, that this man did not care more about himself and his image than anybody else on this planet. And I think he did it, and I think he did it on purpose. Mm-hmm. That's my take on this case.
And you only need the bookend, the beginning and the end. I mean, the end, my synopsis was Michael Peterson enjoyed every moment of being documented and being on camera, to the point that at times you thought he was going to turn and break the fourth wall and talk to the audience.
Yeah.
It just had those moments. And even right at the end when he plays Leonard Cohen, everybody knows.
Yes, that was what I was going to bring that up. Laura, that's amazing. I mean, I wanted to ask Lisa because I figured this is her wallpaper for the episode. But literally, the song said, "You've been faithful, except for a time or two. Everybody knows you've been discreet. But there's been so many people you just had to meet without your clothes on." I mean, what does that choice tell you? Who picked it and why did he approve it?
Yeah, well,
I know, and there are other words in there as well, of talking about things being rigged and fixed, not in your favor, and that you kind of just have to accept that some things are rigged against you. I mean, it's just all for effect, everything, and it wouldn't surprise me. That's his choice, and I just get the sense that he was very heavily involved in every aspect, and then to find out that he was having, an intimate relationship with the editor, and then it was just kind of blown off as if that was nothing, and that she was professional and she managed to move through that unconscious bias that we have when we're intimately involved with someone. So
I'm sure that she feels she was unbiased. I have no doubt about that. But it would be the height of arrogance to think as the director that she could be unbiased is absolutely unconscionable. So, I don't know if Michael Peterson really killed his wife, but I know that Lestrade killed this documentary for me. So I don't know. I don't know what's true. I honestly, I don't know what to believe. So that's the last I will say about this. So there you go.
Yeah, conflicted, and Lestrade is actually asked on Beyond Reasonable Doubt, what do you believe happened? And he gives a very strange answer of, well, he doesn't believe that she fell down the stairs. He thinks that would be strange, but it's a huge mystery. But he thinks he's innocent. 100% unequivocally, yes, he's innocent.
Really?
So if he doesn't think she fell down the stairs, that doesn't fit. And if he thinks he's innocent, what does he think really went on?
I've seen other interviews with him where he doesn't say that, where he doesn't say he thinks he's innocent, but I'm sure he said many things over these many years. I mean, I have seen him say, I don't know what happened. I don't know if he's innocent or guilty, but I guess it depends on which decade you're asking him.
You hear that? That is the sound of my crisp, new, beautiful sheets that I just got from Brook Linen. Brook Linen was started by a husband and wife, Vicki and Rich Fulop, in Brooklyn, New York. So you get it, Brooklyn, Brook Linen. So they didn't think it should be so expensive or difficult to get the feeling of a fancy 5-star hotel quality sheets at home. And their mission was to make luxury sheets without the luxury markup. Most bedding is marked up as much as 300%. So Vicki and Rich have a small business approach, and they take out the middleman, and they are involved in every step of the manufacturing process to customer service. And it must be working because Brook Linen Sheets have been named winner of Best of Online Bedding category by Good Housekeeping, and they're getting rave reviews from Business Insider. So my Brook Linen Sheets are the best, most comfortable sheets I've ever slept on. In fact, have you ever heard of the term cool side of the pillow? Well, on these pillowcases, I always have a cool side of the pillow. And I got the smoke stripe color in both my sheets and a gorgeous duvet cover, which has brightened up my entire bedroom. And I'm going to post some pics on Facebook so you can see for yourself. And Brook Linen has a great selection of other colors and materials to choose from. So here it is. Brooklinen.com is giving an exclusive offer for just our RCP listeners. Get $20 off and free shipping when you use promo code REALCRIME at brooklinen.com. Brook Linen is so sure you'll love your new sheets that they offer a risk-free 60-night satisfaction guarantee and lifetime warranty on all of their sheets and comforters, and that is really incredible. The only way to get $20 off and free shipping is to use promo code REALCRIME at brooklinen.com. That's BROOKLINEN.com, promo code REALCRIME. Brook Linen. They're really the best sheets ever.
But owls have another strategy. They hunt under the cover of darkness. They're sneaky. She has incredibly powerful night vision, and she can zero in on the location of even the smallest noise. Air rushes over her wings as she flies. In most birds, that's noisy. But with owls, there's almost no flapping sound, no rustling. It's quiet.
But you know what we didn't talk about, you guys? Uh-oh. You know who
Not the
we did?
Twit-twoo.
Okay.
Oh my word! They keep coming back on Twitter, so we have to address.
Yeah. So the basis of the owl allegation is that there was some owl feather found. Am I right?
That she had tiny owl feathers that were found in her hair. So Larry Pollard, the neighbor, came up with this theory about owls because of these tiny feathers that were found, as well as her own hair found in her hand.
Now, we know that this sounds kind of crazy, and it probably is crazy, but, everybody thought Dr. Spitz was crazy when he thought there was animal predation in the West Memphis 3 case. So I think it's, worth talking about that this...
Right, owl feathers is different than any kind. There's no claw marks. There's no beak marks. There's no indication that an owl had any contact with her. Now, what you have when you have small feathers, if there are owls in the area, and if she was actually outside, or if somebody else was outside, this is what we call trace evidence. This is what we call transfer evidence. This is what we call completely unassociated transfer evidence. It has nothing to do with the crime. There is nothing. There is not a single scintilla of connection between those feathers and this crime. Unless we can prove that somebody else had contact with this owl and then had contact with her, which again, there's no indication of that at all, other than the fact that Michael Peterson was there, and he says he was outside for extended period of time, and that she had been outside. But the fact is that there's nothing to connect this to the violence that occurred to her. There's not a thing. And to construct some fanciful thing about these owls have killed people before, what? Excuse me? Under what circumstances? What's the case? And how did they manage to kill people without ever having any physical contact or leaving any physical injury on that person.
And we've talked about the 7 lacerations and it being, the wooden staircase that was much more likely to be the murder weapon. And of course, she has got the thyroid cartilage fracture, which the Dr. Radish said is much more common in car crashes or by strangulation. And no owl was involved in that. So I think we can put the owl theory to bed. Yes, you have to think about the 1%. You have to think about, other things that may well have happened. But with that amount of blood, over 10,000 splatters, you have to understand the scene. And yes, there could well be, trace evidence that may well have been on Michael too, from the pathway that they take coming back from the pool back into the house. And Larry Pollard said there were owls, in their neighborhood. Well, of course, I believe that, but that doesn't mean to say that had any bearing on what happened that night when Kathleen Peterson was found dead in her dream home at the age of 14.
And if an owl is attacking her and she's screaming, why isn't her husband hearing her screaming and come running and say, honey, it's just, yeah. Sorry, Larry. I can't go there with you.
But I'm sorry, if the owl was in the house, there would be owl shit. There would be more owl feathers around the house. There would be markings when the owl tried to get out of the house.
Right? How did it get out of the
way. Can I be any more unequivocal about this? There's no way an owl caused her death.
Oh my God.
There's vast amounts of forensic and behavioral information that points at one person. In my mind, it is Michael Peterson, and it is not some unknown named owl. Some other owl did it. That's garbage.
Yep. Agree.
Tell us what you really think.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
Well, this has been amazing.
Don't equivocate. I can say it now.
This has been amazing. Is there anything left to say? I mean, I'm sure there's a million hours left to talk about this, but Well,
I will say this. I have some serious concerns. Michael Peterson is now out. He's made an Alford plea in which he says he takes responsibility for the death of his wife, who, as we have all said, is a footnote in this series. And Kathleen should not be a footnote in this series. Sure. But I worry that, like OJ, we have not heard the last from Michael Peterson. And I don't know if it's going to come out in a way where he gets arrested for some kind of armed robbery like OJ did, or if it's going to come out in another way that's perhaps more violent and perhaps aimed at somebody in his close circle of care and family. I hope it doesn't, but I worry that it might, because I believe this man has likely gotten away with murder twice, and he's emboldened. I remember there's another quote I wrote down. He calls his daughter and he said, and it's over, basically. And then he says, well, I'm planning my next one, all right. And I think he's probably referring to his book. And he says very revealingly, he says, I don't want to be forgotten, Margaret. And that tells you everything about him.
He says he doesn't want to be forgotten?
Correct. He says, I don't want to be forgotten, Margaret. And to me, that is the ultimate in a narcissistic statement. He's wrapping up a Alford plea on the murder of his wife. And what he says is, I don't want to be forgotten, Margaret. He doesn't say, I don't want people to forget my dear departed wife who tragically died, Kathleen.
Well, that's very revealing. And that really does, paint a picture. The same as when he actually comes out of prison and he does a champagne toast. He doesn't once mention Kathleen. It's that omission. Right. It really is, me, myself, and I, that sense of narcissism. It's just
overwhelming.
It really is. Yes, I agree. I do wonder how the relationships continue with Margaret and Martha, and whether there is, over time, any new narrative that they care to share. And of course, with Caitlin, I'm sure that there will be more. And just because Michael Peterson finds it difficult not to put himself in the eye of the storm. So I'm sure that we will hear more from him. Certainly David Rudolph seems to be doing the tour at the moment. He's done a tour of the US talking about the case, and he's just landed in London and will be in Dublin and Cork. So I'm sure he has some interesting things to say. I just hope he remembers that, 2 women are dead, and Kathleen Peterson, I hope he honours her memory. And that's where I would like us to end here, because, in amongst our theories and Leonard Cohen, everybody knows, and all the, the kind of production of Michael Peterson is, a beautiful woman who at the young age of 48 lost her ability to thrive and have relationships with people in the future. She was incredibly bright and vivacious. She was pioneering, a businesswoman who was incredibly sociable and very, very popular, very well liked. And it's such an irony that she died in her dream home at the bottom of the staircase. And, it's still a cause of much discussion and much debate. But she's a wife, a daughter, a sister, and a friend. And the same with Liz Ratliff, who received very little attention. And her remaining family. It's fine in one way, Hollywood entertainment, and it's a cause for conversation, but it's real people and real lives and real impact on them that goes on and on and on.
Well, I think that is a great place to end, and we definitely listen to our listeners, and we appreciate you listening, and we appreciate you sending in your opinions and asking us questions, and we'll continue to be looking out for those on this case and the other ones that we cover on Real Crime Profile.
And so it's important for us to remember the staircase is about Michael Peterson's narrative, and I'm sure most people will remember his name, but I and Real Crime Profile want us to honor the lives of those who no longer have a voice. We use the hashtag, her name was Kathleen Peterson, and also the hashtag, her name was Liz Ratliff. And so for now, this is Real Crime Profile signing off. If you like our podcasts, there are a few things you can do. You can take 2 minutes and go to Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star review. You can also check out all Real Crime Profile offers and promotions and our sponsors in our show notes. Another thing you can do is go to Facebook and like our Facebook page, and you can also follow us on Twitter at Real Crime Profile without the E. And one last thing, please tell your friends, family and colleagues about us and spread the Real Crime Profile word. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate all of our listeners.
Real Crime Profile is produced and edited by Paul Francis Sullivan. Sound engineering by Mike Thal. Music is composed by Simba Tsumba. Logo art by Jim Clementi. Real Crime Profile is produced by XG Productions and distributed by Wondery.
For advice and support if you're experiencing stalking in the UK, you can contact Paladin National Stalking Advocacy Service on 0203 866 4107, or you can go to the website where there's a lot of information and advice that you can follow on www.paladinservice.co.uk. If you're experiencing domestic abuse, you can call the National Domestic Violence Helpline for free on 0800 2000 247. In the US, if you're experiencing domestic abuse and need advice, shelter or counselling, you can call Genesis, the 24-hour hotline, on 214-946-4357. You can also go to their website for further advice or support, www.genesisshelter.org. And there's the Domestic Violence Hotline on 800 799 7233.